Hey YouTube, so I'm coming to you today from what we call our foster room. I thought this would be a good place to tell how I got into this whole adoption thing, as well as Robert's adoption story.
1, 2, 3.
Let's go. When I was about 6 years old, we came home from church. At church, there had been this children's message where they talked about how there were children all over the world, in all different countries, and children in our own country as well, who didn't have families, who didn't have homes. And so when I got home, I asked my parents to take in all those kids. Of course, this is 6-year-old thinking. I'm like, well, there's kids out there without a home. We have a home. Bring them. Come on, let's do this. And when my parents said, no, we're not going to do that, I was put off. I was actually a little upset with them. And I said, fine, I'll have to do it when I'm older then. Years go by, and interestingly enough, my mother ends up going into social work. She had been a youth pastor, and then she went into a regional center helping families with children with disabilities. And then she ended up going into foster care and adoption social work, where she served for about 21, 22 years. I was around it all the time. On and on, my heart grew more and more for that ministry. I know if you're not religious, I get it, but at the same time, your whole soul, your whole being goes into it. And so in that way, I call it this service that you're giving other people. I call it a ministry. As my mom was involved in this ministry and I was around it all the time, my passion grew. So as I got older, I thought about it constantly from 18 on, because I knew at 18 in our state, if you could live independently, basically that you could be a foster parent. But I was really concerned about being a single man doing that. And so I said, I'll wait till I get married. No big deal. I'll just find someone who I know will be into this, because this is a huge part of my life. Well, years roll on and on and on and on, and dated a bunch, didn't get married, still wasn't happening. I hit a certain age and I went, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it. I just need to do it and stop making excuses. I got all the forms and I filled them out and began the process. And I went, you know what? No. And I knew how hard. Most foster families go in and they're like, oh, it's going to be so cute. And those kids, when we give them enough love, they'll be perfect. I knew better than that. And so I knew how hard it was. And my mom was often on call, and I'd hear the crazy, crazy stories as I sat there next to her. And she's like, okay, so he's on the roof? Yep. And so has he thrown poop at you or just at the neighbors? Okay, yep. And did he start the fire? I'm hearing these conversations. So I know a little bit of what I'm getting into. That scared me so much. And I don't know. I backed off from the idea of doing foster care or adoption for a little while. I was a youth director then, just as I am now. I ended up taking a bunch of children to a retreat. And the speaker that weekend had adopted a child from Uganda and shared that story and how he saw God active through that whole story. And in that, I really felt God going, come on, Nick, come on. And then I go home. The pastor's message that following week was also somehow about being adopted into God's family. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I hear you, God. And so I tell my mom, okay, I'm going to do this. And she says, it's about time. And my father similarly says, all right, good, finally. That was when I finally started doing all the trainings and all the things I needed to do to adopt. I still stalled a few times during that process as I had second thoughts, but then I moved forward. And I'll say that the agency I worked with was not at all biased against a single man. It was a Christian agency, private Christian agency, and so I was nervous about that going in. But at the time, I also really wanted to go with a Christian agency. And they were so supportive, and they had my back, and they were with me all the way. Incredible. And shout out to Shauna, such a incredible social worker that she was. So I really appreciate you if you're listening to this. So that was the beginning of the story of how I pursued this process. Then I received an email that I had been certified and that my certificate or whatever was on the way, was in the mail. And almost immediately I got an email from my agency saying, hey, here the county specifically asked for you, asking if this was something you would consider. And it was a boy who now, by the way, is Robert. And he had like pages and pages of issues and diagnoses. And they said at the very bottom, we know this sounds like a lot, but we really do believe if this child gets in the right home, that there would be hope for him. I prayed this over and talked it over with a number of people, including my mom, and ended up going, well, I don't know. And they said, well, can you just take him for a weekend respite? Because the family is going to Disneyland and they can't, with all his behaviors, take him with them. And I said, yeah, I can do a weekend respite. That might be a good chance to get to know him and decide from there. I went to meet him on Wednesday so it wouldn't be like, here, you're going to go be with a stranger. He played with some toys and I talked with him for a little while and he seemed kind of quiet. He's not quiet, but he seemed kind of quiet at that time. But he did eventually answer my questions of what he likes to eat, and macaroni and cheese and Fruit Loops, I think, were his answers. He played with trucks and that was fine. So I go to pick him up on the Friday. They give me like a grocery bag with some clothes in it for him. And I think it was some clothes and a stuffed animal. And this, I'm sure, scared to death 7-year-old comes with me and gets in the car, and we're driving home, and I really feel like I've like kidnapped this kid, right? Like you're driving this strange kid to your home. There wasn't any paperwork to sign. There's nothing that, for whatever reason, nothing that I received with him. Just the person at the counter is like, huh? Oh yeah, Robert, okay, there he is, and here's a paper bag, I guess, for you. And I walked out and I'm like, and the 7-year-old's following me. We go and we play mostly with cars. I had all these like Matchbox kind of cars and played with them all weekend, and things went pretty well. On Monday, I realized I didn't know if I was supposed to take him to school, if someone else was picking him up to take him to school like early in the morning, or if he was going to school and then I wouldn't pick him up, someone else would, or what the deal was. So I tried calling, no one answered. I'm like, okay, well, I'll show up after school. I show up, the office is like, well, we don't know anything either, but hang out for a little bit. And so I did, and no one showed up, and so I took him home. So I keep calling the county, calling them. It gets to be Tuesday. I'm like, now I really feel like I've kidnapped this kid. Like no one is responding to me. What is supposed to be happening? On and on and on. Like it gets to be Wednesday. Finally, someone returns my call, and I'm in like total panic mode. They say, well, are things working out? I said, what do you mean? Is he doing okay there? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. We've mostly been playing with cars. I'm like, cool. Why doesn't he just stay? I'm like, oh, okay. And so the other family apparently had said after they got back that they weren't going to take him back. They had 2 children with similar behaviors and they just couldn't handle it. So they needed a place for him. And finally they got back to me and asked if I would be that place, which was interesting. Interesting way for it to all happen and work out.